Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing the box office breakdown from this past weekend, which saw the wide releases of new films like The Bad Guys, The Northman, and the Nicolas Cage starring film The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Try saying that 5 times fast. It is hard. We also have the second weekend numbers for Father Stew and for Fantastic Beasts 3, and let's just say things are looking quite bad for the third Fantastic Beasts film, The Secrets of Dumbledore, as it has seen a massive drop-off in the domestic market and is not seeing nearly as much love in the international market as it would need to in order to make up the losses that it is having here in the North American marketplace. So we'll talk about that and some other films. So before we go any further, make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you never time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So of course, coming in at number 1 this weekend is a new release, and quite surprising, it is The Bad Guys. It's a new animated film from Universal, making $24 million in its opening weekend, which is about a almost $6,000 per theater number there, coming out at over 4,000 theaters. So very strong start for this movie. Based on the budget for the film, it's actually in a pretty good place based on this and the international numbers to be able to likely make its money back and make some profits. It is clearly the choice for a lot of families this weekend, as it is an animated film, though Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is definitely still pulling its weight even after 3 weeks of release, coming in at number 2 for the second week in a row, beating out Fantastic Beasts. So again, Sonic 2, third week release, beating out the second weekend release of Fantastic Beasts. Just shows you, one, how weak the opening weekend of Fantastic Beasts is, or was rather, and also how large the drop-off between week 1 and week 2 was for the film, too. So Sonic the Hedgehog 2, $15.2 million, 48% hold from the previous week, $145.8 million is the total domestic for that film, so doing quite well there. Whereas Fantastic Beasts 3 from Warner Brothers made $14 million, and something that I mentioned in the video that I made for Geeks and Gamers, and I'll mention it here too, is that it's pretty bad that Fantastic Beasts in its second week of release only beat out The Northman by $2 million. And the reason why I say that is not because The Northman is a garbage film by any means, but it's rather that The Northman, even though the budget for the film is actually pretty high for a film like it should have been a lot less, to be honest. Focus Features and Robert Eggers really should have not spent as much money on that film as they did, because I think it's going to end up just hurting them in the long run. But you look at a film like The Northman, a rated R film, definitely an independent feeling film from a filmmaker who's made movies like The Lighthouse, movies like Witch, which not a lot of people have seen, right? Definitely a lot more, picky movie watchers for those films. Whereas Fantastic Beasts 3 is the third film in a Fantastic Beasts franchise, which is like the 12th, 13th, whatever film in the Harry Potter Wizarding World franchise. And the fact that in the second week, it dropped off this much and had a 1,000 theater advantage as well, that should spell some very serious trouble for Warner Brothers, but also it should be a positive sign towards The Northman, though I do say that positivity towards Northman does have to come with that caveat that it still has a long way to go if it hopes to be able to make its money back. But Fantastic Beasts, 67% dropping to $14 million, only at $67.1 million domestically. That means that this film, if the holds continue this way, if it continues to drop over 50% almost every single week, I think you'll start to see them throw this film out of theaters very, very quickly. You'll see Warner Brothers start to pull this film back. I would not be surprised if you start to hear, HBO Max release. You'll start to hear more and more about that, trying to get at least some people to go see this film, trying to be able to create some positive, buzz around it, saying, oh, well, we had a huge influx of viewers when it got released on HBO Max, right? Trying to spin it as best they can, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to really save this franchise at this point in time, because based on the numbers for the second weekend and based on my estimates, the chance of this film losing money is very, very, very high. And though it is still not enough for it to not be able to make it up in the long run through other means like physical media, etc., not that there's a lot of people who would be buying this on physical media, but hey, it does have its fan base. It's still, again, $67 million is not nothing to the regular everyday person, everyday Joe, like you or me. So that is still something that people are going to be buying, and so it could be enough to make up, but it's really going to have to be a wait-and-see game for that movie. Coming in at number 4 is The Northman. So as I mentioned in my review, I gave it a solid B, but I'm just not all that crazy about it. I thought that it kind of got lost a little bit, similar to what a lot of the Robert Eggers films have done, right? Especially with The Lighthouse and The Witch. They really just, I think, go a little bit too far into the weird. And I know that some people really like that and are entertained by that, and they like it because of its uniqueness and its originality. For me, weirdness for the sake of weirdness is just not something I find that appealing. And even though there are some really great parts of The Northman, I think that those weird parts for me keep it from being in one of my favorite films of the year list, and from being a film that I can, fully fully put my entire weight behind as well. Not that I'm, that much of a person as far as, subscriber count, view count, etc. But as I mentioned last week, if this film was good, after I was saying, if I see this film and I love it, I'm going to be pushing for this until the cows come home. I didn't get that experience with this movie. And so I know a lot of other people had very different experiences. Some people think that this movie was bad. Some people think, a lot more people on this channel, in this community, think that this film is really good. Obviously, if you follow me from Friday Night Tights, you know that the entire panel of Friday Night Tights who had seen it love this movie. And I think that this is going to make a lot of people very happy. But I also think those lots of people that are going to be happy are going to be a very small fragment of the movie-going population. And so there's a lot of things holding this film back, and because of its massive budget, $12 million in its domestic opening, not a very good start for the budget that this film has. If this film was around a $30 million film, which is really what it probably should have been, because I think they could have probably made this film for about that much, and they wouldn't have lost a whole lot, I think, in visual effects and such, or maybe they would just have to have cut out any of their crazy visual effects, which may have actually been for the best, because that was some of the more mystical stuff in the movie. They kind of, again, shot themselves in the foot by having a massive budget for this movie being made by a filmmaker who has a very strong, devoted fan base, but, again, very small, devoted fan base. Nonetheless, the unbearable weight of massive talent from Lionsgate. Speaking of someone who has a pretty massive fan base, Nicolas Cage. They're not showing up for this movie, though. So this very self-aware film where Nicolas Cage plays Nicolas Cage and is in on the joke of all the Nicolas Cage jokes. Apparently, people don't want to see it. People in meme culture, etc., I thought would be trying to eat this film alive, eat this film up. But at over 3,000 theaters, came in well underneath even The Northman. I'm actually quite surprised by this, to be perfectly honest. This film costs around $30 million, and so it's not in the worst case scenario at this point, but it's definitely not a good start for this film. So you could actually see this Nicolas Cage film where he plays Nicolas Cage end up losing money. And again, it'll be very interesting to see exactly what the future of this film holds and what that week 2 drop-off is going to be. Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I'm going to see tomorrow, so very excited to finally go see this film that deals with a multiverse, but is not in a comic book world, which I think is awesome and intriguing to me, but had one of the worst release schedules, I think, by A24, kind of in this reverse model of releasing it at a few theaters and then building up on it. I guess trying to build word of mouth. I just don't think it ended up helping it in the long run, because it then lost the opportunity to make money during weeks with less competition going on. And I think that is, ultimately going to be how this film is remembered from a marketing standpoint. However, it is still doing well regardless. So a 12% hold from last week in its 5th week of release, $5.4 million. Again, that's pretty impressive for a film like this. $26.9 million is the total for the domestic for this movie, but it costs enough to where it still has a little ways to go if it's going to make its money back. Lost City came in at number 7, dropping from the number 3 spot, $4.3 million, starting to lose a lot more theaters in its 5th week of release. And so even though the hold percentage is strong, because the opening was not as large as I'm sure they were hoping for, this film also is not likely at this point to make its money back. Father Stu, wish I could say anything about whether the film is going to make money or not, because $3.3 million, though a strong hold from its opening weekend, putting this now at $13.8 million domestically, we don't have a budget. And without a budget, I can't crunch the numbers, and without crunching the numbers, can't really say whether the film is a financial success or not. And I know that some people get caught up in saying, why are you so obsessed with financial successes? And, I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. The reason why is because even if it is true, because it is, that a film's money, like how much a film makes or loses, does not say whether the film is good or bad, it does indicate to studios, and it does indicate to the general populace whether or not a film is well liked. It is a metric that people tend to use. But again, if you want films like Father Stu, where it's a retelling of a real-life story that most people probably would never have thought to make into a movie, or if you're a fan of a film like The Northman, for instance, and you're like, I want more films like this, or just the concept alone, I want more like it, unless those films make their money back at least bare minimum, or get close enough to be able to make it up in the long run, or maybe as a tax write-off, studios are not going to be wanting to take those risks. And so you're going to continue to get these massive comic book films. You're going to continue to get these sequels upon sequels upon sequels, and you're going to continue to get just content that is void of any originality, void of any creativity whatsoever. And so that's why these films making money is so important, because especially with films like Father Stu and The Northman, I feel like those are films that are more likely to have a very strong devoted fan base. But again, if you want more films like it, not to say that you want a sequel to the film that we're being talked about, and there's not going to be a sequel to Father Stu, for instance. It's not the kind of movie it is. And then for The Northman as well, not really the story that's going to have a sequel either. It is, again, more so about the principle, and it's more so about telling studios, yeah, we like these kinds of movies. We like the kinds of stories that are being told here. But if they see massive losses next to these films, then the studio says, okay, well, we tried it and it didn't work, so we're not going to try it again. So, and also, if any of the actors or directors were the main reason why they decided to go with it, like let's say Mark Wahlberg's clout was the reason why they made Father Stu, well, if this film doesn't make money or is not able to get a return on the investment or ends up being a financial loss, the studio heads at that studio are going to say, oh yeah, that's right, you brought us that film that didn't do anything. And that's what they're going to remember. And the next time that he has a story that he really wants to be told, again, could cause a lot of problems, and so that's the reason why it is so important. Morbius continues to have massive drops, over 50%. Now it's 4th week of release, and they're starting to pull this bad boy from theaters very quickly, so not surprising here at all. Terrible word of mouth, and just a really bad movie to begin with. $2.2 million making this film. Definitely not going to get to the $100 million point at this time, and very well could end up being in the red, and actually could end up performing worse than my worst case scenario originally. And again, that has a lot to do with these massive drop-offs week in and week out. Ambulance also dropping as well to the number 10 spot in its 3rd week of release, dropping another 56%, and also being pulled by Universal. So as you can see, Ambulance, not a very popular film, and as I mentioned previously, even though half decent story there, shaky cam is atrocious. The cinematography is atrocious. And so even if I like the story, even if I love the story, which again, it's a half decent story, and I like it okay, but it's nothing groundbreaking. Even if I loved it, I would still not recommend this to most people, because most people going to see this film would blame me for the headache that they get from seeing the movie because of the terrible cinematography. So again, I'm not surprised at all that this film is having massive drop-offs, and even though some people are saying that they like the film, aren't necessarily recommending the film to be seen. Whereas The Batman coming at number 11, going to talk about this one, $1.5 million, 60% drop. So this is also starting to lose theaters. HBO Max, the fact that it's on HBO Max and it's still making over $1 million, hey, kudos to them for continuing to make some money. Going into the worldwide numbers now, The Bad Guys, $87.1 million. Pretty strong start for this film. Let's see some of the markets that it is being released in. So United Kingdom, a big part of that. Spain, Australia, a big part of that as well. So $87.1 million, pretty good. This is a film that cost around $70 million or so to make. And so even though obviously it's got to make more than that, because you've got to make around 2.5 times the original production budget to break even, it is still well on its way to being able to get to that point, and it would not surprise me for this film to break even and make some profit, and I'll have projections on that next weekend. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, as I mentioned, is still doing very, very well. Very, very close domestic, international numbers. This is well liked across the board, both in the domestic, more North American audience, but also across the pond in different areas like the UK and other places too. $287.8 million is the international gross for this film. So by next weekend, this movie will have passed up the original Sonic the Hedgehog film. So again, very, very strong numbers here. And even though I wasn't a fan of it, clearly a lot of people were. Fantastic Beasts 3, on the other hand, this is a film that is just, if you want to see pretty crazy numbers here, look at this international versus domestic. 67.1 versus 213.2. So this film is massively dropping off in the North American market and is not likely to hit $100 million. So let's say that it gets to $300 million internationally and it doesn't get to $100 million. So you're looking at a film that will be around $400 million or a little bit less. And remember, I did the comparison between this and the other films in the franchise before, and this actually would make a lot of sense because it would be similar to the drop-off the second film saw from the first film. First film, second film, there's around $200 million difference. That would mean another $200 million difference or so from this film and the second film. So it actually would make sense and would work in that capacity. But that means that this film could actually maybe even do worse, which means that this film could be a pretty massive loss. And again, couldn't happen to nicer people, especially as they continue to do dealings with China. $15.7 million, meaning 75% of that went to the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm going to call that out for this and any other studio, but especially because this film is just, again, a reminder of the fact that they, blacklisted Johnny Depp while leaving Amber Heard completely untouched. And they continue to try and push out these films. J.K. Rowling is a part of the problem too, of just pure cash grabs. And that's all that these have been since the very beginning, but it's just gotten worse and worse. Here, this film's not as bad as the second one at the very least, but doesn't mean that I really want to go see it by any means whatsoever, especially these images and the things you hear about the film and where they take the characters, it's just, at this point, it's like, just go away. Just go away, please. The Northman, as I said, had a stronger than expected, at least for me and some other, I'm sure some others as well, opening weekend. $23.5 million worldwide. So that's in addition to $12 million domestically, it made $11.5 million in the international marketplace. As I said, very, very strong start for a film if this film had a lower budget, but it did not. So this film does not have the budget listed here on the numbers, but we do have, of course, listings that show this film costing anywhere between $70 and $90 million, meaning if you just take the average of that, this film needs to make $200 million to break even. 23.5 opening weekend, not a very good start if you want to get to $200 million by the end of the run. So if you really like this film and you want to support this film, you got to go see it more. You got to try and get people to go see it for the first time, for the second time, because it's going to need all the help that it can get if it's going to hope to break even. The unbearable weight of massive talent, as I said, hard to say. $7.1 million domestically, not doing much internationally, but also not doing much here either. So looks like it was an experiment that didn't turn out all that well. You also have here the worldwide total for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Again, I'm seeing this on Monday, so hopefully I'll have a review from the car. People like that, apparently. So another car video review, as some might say, going old school a little bit for anyone who's been watching Geeks and Gamers for a while as well. Anyway, this film is doing, again, well enough for a smaller budget independent film, but still not quite as much as it would need in order to be able to have a return on its investment. And again, they don't post the budget here, but I do have the reported budget in my charting. The Lost City, $95.2 million. Will it hit $100 million? I think there's a good chance that it hits $100 million before everything is said and done, but still going to be a financial flop. Father Stu, no budget yet. Can't say much to it other than I really like the film. Gave it an A-. I recommend it highly. Whether you're a person of faith or not, I think that there is a lot of stuff in this film that people will like. It's a story of redemption, if you like. Just a good old story about redemption that just happens to be about someone who starts off, cursing and sinful and becomes a priest. Then this might be the kind of film that you are interested in. Morbius, $156 million worldwide. Yeah. What else can be said other than this film is doing so much worse than what was originally projected? Ambulance doing, again, similar, and I'm not surprised at all. I just don't understand this film. I just, again, Michael Bay, what were you thinking with that cinematographer? That's all I have to say about that. And then the Batman continuing to make a little bit of money, but really not making that much more. It made its money back, and so it is setting itself up for further films in the future. Let's go ahead and look at some charting, because we like to talk about some charts here on the channel. So the Northman, $23.5 million opening weekend. Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, $7.1 million. Bad Guys, $87.1 million as well. We have the second weekend numbers, though, for Fantastic Beasts 3 and Fathers 2. And so based on the week 2 numbers of Fantastic Beasts, I can project the film will make somewhere between $400 and $560 million. So again, this is going to be very interesting to follow over the course of the next week and really the next several weeks as well. Just how much money does this film lose? Because I think that 70% projected number might actually end up being worse. So, Morbius actually might end up doing worse than the minimum projection that I had for it, because again, these are just based on historical trends. This film, I think, could also potentially get to that same place as well, making less than $400 million worldwide is what I'm trying to say there. So yeah, not looking very good for this film that cost $200 million in just the production budget. So a massive amount of money, needs to make $500+ million just to break even. And I don't think it's going to get anywhere close to that number. Again, there is a max number here. If it doubles its money in the next several weeks, I just don't see that happening, though, based on the week 2 drop-off. And I would not be surprised if you start to see this film continue to spiral out very quickly. Father Stu, $13.8 million, is projected to make somewhere between $19 and $27 million. Hard to say whether or not that's good or not, because we don't have a budget for the actual film. Talking about budgets for the Northman, as I mentioned previously, it's projected somewhere between $70 and $90 million. And so therefore, I've updated the chart to be around, again, the median, or rather the average of those two. So $80 million, meaning it needs to make $200 million to break even. As I said, if you like the film, even though it started off stronger than expected, it still has a long way to go if it's going to make any money back. And again, if you want more films like that, it's going to have to make its money back, really, or at the very least get pretty close to it. Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent costs $30 million, meaning it needs to break even at $75 million. We'll see if that's able to come to fruition. It just doesn't seem that way at this point, but it very well could. Bad Guys, $70 million, needs to make $175 million to break even. Again, with the weekend numbers as they stand right now, I would say that it's actually in a good place to be able to do so, but we won't really know for sure until next weekend. and then the $200 million of Fantastic Beasts, $500 million is the break even. And so we can make some projections that this film will either lose between $59 million or could make as much as $36 million. As I mentioned, this seems more likely, and it could actually be even worse than this if it performs similar to what we saw with Morbius. So let's go ahead and look at some of the numbers right now. So Fantastic Beasts, as it stands right now, $280 million worldwide. It's at $131 million in losses. Not all that surprising. Not all that surprising at all. But let's see just how much money this film ends up losing. But this film could end up being a massive flop, or it could just end up being a typical, standard as you are kind of flop as well. So I could see this film doing worse than $40 million worldwide, but maybe the international market does push it over that number. Still, it's not making money. I can pretty much confidently say that at this point. The Bad Guys, $87.1 million at this point means it's at $52 million in the red. Again, I think that it'll probably cut that in half by next weekend, and we'll probably be able to get pretty close in about 3 or 4 weeks to breaking even, making some profit based on the numbers as they currently stand, even though there's, of course, going to be a lot of competition coming out over the next couple of weeks. So next week is kind of a dead week from what I remember. I think it's just the Liam Neeson film Memory that's coming out next week, I think. And then, of course, May 6th, you have the Doctor Strange film coming out, and that's going to be the number one film at the box office, no matter how you feel about that. That's just the fact of the matter. Northman, as I mentioned, 23.5 is stronger than expected, but because of its massive budget, puts it at $105 million in the hole in the red. And so if you want this film to be successful, if you want more films like it, if you want Robert Eggers to continue to make films like it and to get higher budgets, this film's got to make its money back. I just don't see that happening at this point. I just don't see where it's going to get that money from. I don't see that being in the cards, but you never know. Miracles do happen. Maybe it continues to perform well week on and week on. Who knows? Who knows, really, at this point? But again, does not seem very likely based on historical standards. Here are some of the updates for some of the other films. So Everything Everywhere All at Once right now is still $20 million in the red. So as I said, even though it's still doing relatively well week on, week in, week out, still not doing enough really to hit its break-even point. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 continuing to make money. It's going to be well over 50. It could be somewhere between $50 and $100 million in its profit margin. So definitely doing very well at this point. Ambulance, not so much being pulled from theaters. Right now it's at $31 million in red, and I would not be surprised if it stays around that number. So again, not good numbers there. Morbius, $156.5 million means it's only $18 million in the red, which wouldn't be terrible, except because of the massive losses that this film is seeing, and because now it's being pulled from theaters. The worst case scenario I had for this film was a $4 million loss. I would say that this film is definitely on pace to do worse than that. So do not be surprised if this film ends up being north of $4 million in losses. Again, 81% compared to the first 2 weeks. So remember, 70% is typically the worst a film does. This film's at 81%. So not looking very good for this film. Lost City continuing to, again, be the flop that I thought it was going to be based on those early numbers there. And so that seems to be playing out exactly the way I thought. And then The Batman, as I mentioned, we updated those numbers, still at $155.3 million in net gain profit, coming at about the average. So it definitely didn't perform as well as other films have done historically, but well enough to be able to make its money back and to make some pretty good profits to boot. So those are the numbers. What are y'all's thoughts? Have you seen films like The Northman, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, The Bad Guys, Fantastic Beasts? And what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that Fantastic Beasts is going to be a massive financial failure? I think that all the signs are really pointing in that direction at this point in time. And also, what do you think is the reason why the film is failing as bad as it is? And also, what are your thoughts about The Northman and any of the other films that are brand new that came out? And what do you think is going to happen in the long run for those box office? Again, I don't see the numbers being there for The Northman. That's not me being a hater. That's just me being realistic, looking at the numbers as they stand. I would say probably something similar for The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, though it has a lot less road to cover to get to that point. And I think The Bad Guys will end up doing quite well. I have no interest in seeing it because people like Lily Singh are doing the voices for it, and I just don't really care to see that or to hear that. So anyway, have you seen these films? What do you if you have? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, slap that fire button on Odyssey. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. If you are a Patreon Subscribe Star Locals member, be on the lookout. I'm going to have a post explaining some of the changes that are going to be happening to some of the different tiers. Just think of it as some of the perks are going to be switching locations. I'm going to start off with a general switch, a basic switch that I think will be for the benefit of most people. For the month of May, and then the month of June is when there'll be probably the largest change. And again, I'll explain more and be on the lookout for that over the next couple of days before the end of April. That way you're able to know those things before the month of May goes into effect. Anyway, you guys are great. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my April Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals members. Starting off with Patreon with animation commentator Brandon, let's go Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Hymir Ari Hymeson, Inflamed Wood, Jacob from Holland, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Priscilla Hall, Rosella Allen, Stan Andrian, Miss Martin Muses, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stand 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alice McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. And also a huge shout out to my Locals members, starting off with Kara Tharp, K Tharp 56. Also, UAB, Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Robert Barnes, and also a huge support as well to Brett D90. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Locals. And I want to add a shout out for my newest Patreon member, One-Eyed Jack. Thank you again to everyone for supporting the channel. Please, if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out the top link at the video description. It is my Willow link, as I like to describe it, and it brings you to a link tree where you get access to all of these different locations, as well as all of the various social media platforms that you can follow me on. If you join at the Citizen of Asgard level, you get your name shouted out at the end of every single live stream and video. Army of Asgard level gets you that, plus you get access to a giveaways channel that I have on Discord. If you ever don't have access to that giveaways channel, please contact me. I do send out the link to the Discord and with the instructions on it at the beginning of every single month. But if you don't have access to that giveaways channel where I'm giving away 4Ks and Blu-rays and all that kind of stuff, as much as I possibly can give away is available there. Please just reach out to me and I will gladly walk you through the process to make sure you get access to that giveaways channel. And again, that is, Army of Asgard level, whether you be on Patreon, Subscribe Star, or on Locals. Also, if you are the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get access to all of that. Plus, you get access to a podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. We try and do it once or twice a month. I think we're going to try and do it twice this month to make up for some miscommunication that we had last month. So be on the lookout for that, and look out for those podcast Q&A posts that are always available on the Patreon main page, the Subscribe Star main page, on the YouTube side of things as well. The YouTube community tab, you'll always find the podcast Q&A there, and also on the Locals page as well. And if you join at the Chosen of Valhalla level, the highest of the levels, you get access to all of that. Plus, if it's your first month, you get a free t-shirt, any t-shirt you want from my Teespring, my TeePublic, whichever one you want to get it from. You just let me know the size, location I'm sending it to, color, that kind of stuff. You get it sent to you. Plus, you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we all come together and just talk about movies and really anything the Chosen want to talk about, and it is a lot of fun. Anyway, thank you all very much for your love and for your support. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.